I'd like to welcome everyone to our Finance and Administrative Committee meeting today. Looks like the town clock is a little ahead of the internet clock, but nevertheless, we will move on. Today's agenda has been before committee members.
I move adoption. Second.
All in favor? Minutes from our May 29th and June 26th meetings of 2025 also been in your possession. Is there a motion there?
I move approval. Second.
All in favor? Next, we have presentations. We'll have an update from the Coastal Community Development Corporation. Mr. Alan Wolf. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Alan Wolf, President of the Search Group, Chairman of the Board for the CCDC. And just wanted to provide an update. You all have a couple graphs there which show 17 units here on Hilton Head that the Coastal Community Development Corporation has purchased. And 15 of those were funded partially with town funds from the affiliated agency funding request. 15 of the 17, we're closing on our 18th this week on Friday, which will be in Forest Cove. So you can see Forest Cove has 2 units. There'll be 3 there after that. Pretty good disbursement across the island, and I think a very good representation across the workforce, which is on the next slide. You can also see the 50% units there. Very high demand for those 4 units when they came up. Those are roughly running for $1,000 for a 2-bedroom, which were just in extremely high demand, as you can imagine, on the island. So the application process worked well, put local workers in every case in those units, and we've never had a shortage of local worker applications, of course, for all the units that we've had available. So very happy with the work that we've done at Hilton Head, and are working very hard to continue to raise funds, you know, in the private sector, public sector, everywhere we can to continue our work. Carletha pointed out there are no surge employees, unfortunately, yet in any of those units. These are all just workers in general for our community. Any questions I can answer?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Turner.
Yes, I have a few questions. Thank you very much for coming today and updating us. You talked about there's no shortage of finding people to fill these slots. Mm-hmm. What kind of waiting list do you have?
It depends on the price point. What I referenced in particular was the 50% units had very high demand. The wait list varies depending on rental rate. There's one Tabby Walk available right now, a 2-bedroom that just opened up at the beginning of August, I believe, and it's $2,000. So there's a few applications that are pending. And if there's a $1,000 unit, there'll be 50 applications pending. So it just depends on the price point, which drives how long that list is.
Okay. When you see the AMI range distribution, is that what you were looking for in regards to the distribution?
It's more favorable than we had looked for. Originally, it was always premised that we would have 1 unit at 50%, 2 units at 80%, and 1 unit at 120%. So we've been able to add more 50% units thanks to some donations that we've received along the way. The 100% units are not part of our original prescription, but we've been able to do that to have even lower than 120%. So I think it's better distribution than we had originally promised or needed. The original rubric was based on a property tax abatement, which is offered at the state level. If you have 1 unit at 50%, 2 units at 80, and 1 at 120. That has been a very difficult thing to get a hold of because we're dealing with Columbia, who then talks to the county, and Columbia has been incredibly challenging to get a single property tax abatement completed yet. So,
I know that when you went in and purchased these opportunities, there were many times people already living in them. How many would you say have just retained there versus bringing new renters into this program?
I would say estimate 50% of the units probably still have the original tenants from when we bought it. The one that we're buying this Friday, for example, has tenants that have lived there for 3 or 4 years. So that's another example, one that will keep those tenants in place and immediately look for an opportunity to move them into a purchase scenario. But I'd say roughly 50%. I'm sure we could get the exact number if you'd like.
And what have you learned during this process? There had to be some learnings as you rolled out a new program.
Yeah, the number one thing is there's certain communities on Hilton Head that are highly desirable for non-legal status residents, and we are not eligible to rent to those folks, so they don't qualify for our application process. We've had to be very careful about, if we're buying a unit, to make sure that there's demand for legal resident workers. So that's definitely been one piece of it. We've learned that the third-party management system wasn't as necessary as we thought that it may be. Our program manager, Carletha Frazier, has managed up to 100 units in her real estate profession previously, and she's been able to do a wonderful job of bringing all of those units in-house. So we're roughly 85 to 90% of the units are now being self-managed, which saves us 8% and allows us to offer more affordable rents. So that was a positive thing. And it's just a lot harder to raise money than we thought. That would be my third one, yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Bryson?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for what you're doing for the community.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your
It's a big team, but I'll take the
stepping
credit
up.
if you like, thank you.
We'll pass it along to the whole team.
Yes.
You mentioned fundraising is a tough part of it. Can you give us some idea about the types of funds that you're able to acquire? I know a lot of it's private funding, percentage of private funding, and then what about other funding from like the town and the county
Sure.
and other entities?
We've raised about $12 million to date, I'd say, and of course, our goal there is to spend it by buying units, so it's all been expended for the most part. And I'd say that of the 12 million, 1.2 exactly, so 10% has been through municipal funds, 600 from the town of Hilton Head, 600 from Beaufort County, through the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust. We have secured donations of roughly $2.5 million, and we've secured private mortgages of another, say, $1.5 million. We've secured bank mortgages of just over $2 million between the two markets on Hilton Head and in Bluffton. And then we've secured, roughly the balance in altruistic capital, which is at a 3% return, so a below market return on a 10-year promissory note from investors. We are embarking on a housing trust fund effort, which is not new to America. There's been a very successful $70 million raise up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that same firm is doing it in Charleston for $50 million. So we just received our first draft of the legal documents on that yesterday. The idea there being we'd be able to offer a secure investment for people, not just an unsecured promissory note investment. So we think what we have there is an opportunity to make a big impact on the fundraising side, because it's asking less for just donations, but offering someone a security instrument. And that'll be used, our goal is 10 million on Hilton Head to work on the Novant Health Project for the apartments, and then 40 million off island and across Beaufort and Jasper County.
But it's impressive, the array of different funding sources. The town, we're blessed with lots of different funding sources, so it's impressive that CCDC has been able to have a variety of funding sources and not rely on one or two funding sources. So congratulations
Thank you.
on that.
It was always predicated $1 from public. We'd go out and find the other 4. I think we've overachieved in that, initial goal.
Great, thank you very much.
Ms. Bryson, again, Mr. Wolf, thank you for being here. I just
sir.
got a couple of questions. So the report that you are providing us is for the 17, hopefully soon to be 18 properties here on Hilton Head. Just for better conversation or understanding, how many units do you guys have in your portfolio total that others would be off of Hilton Head?
Yeah, 23 off island in the Bluffton or Beaufort unincorporated market. And that takes us to 40, which will be 41 as of this week.
Got it.
This Friday.
It was interesting as I looked at these graphs, but there's a large amount that's within the 50, 80% AMI. And then as you started to break down the types of folks that are living in these units, landscaping, food and beverage, healthcare, that's well over 50% of the occupants. I guess my question is going towards, as the market starts to shift, I understand that there are a lot of condos that are going on to the market now. The short-term rental market is not what it once was.
I would
right?
agree with that.
Yeah. And I appreciate you looking for funding for the Novant project. but in terms of these units that will be soon available and not wanting them to be short-term rentals, can you talk a little bit about any strategies that you may have as far as fundraising or keeping your eyes open so that you can catch these deals as they come about?
Short-term rentals would be a priority for sure. Anytime we can get one back to the long-term rental market, that's ideal. It's still a very costly proposition on Hilton Head Island. You know, the average price of those units coming back is gonna be $300,000 to $350,000, which is the high end of what we can stomach. But to the extent that we can raise funds, that will remain a high target. We don't have any inside information typically on when those are coming up. We are more typically contacted when there's a bulk of units coming available. For instance, 8 Cordillo units I think are available off market right now. They do not meet the criteria that we need to be successful in our program, nor do we have the funding sitting there. But we typically would get contacted when bigger chunks come available, it seems like.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions? We're good? Thank you, Mr. Wolf, for
Thank you.
coming to see us, and keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next we will have Mr. Troyer to give us a monthly financial update on the year 2026.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for the opportunity. Glad to be here. Glad to be back. A couple of things that I wanted to emphasize. You see the report here, but just to talk a little bit about just some of the mechanics and some of our process, so you can kind of look under the hood a little bit into what is happening behind the scenes at finance. First, I wouldn't want to let this moment go by without recognizing our bond rating upgrade. And so just recently, Standard & Poor's has upgraded the town to a AAA. And so that makes the town a AAA, which is one of 2 communities in South Carolina that has achieved that. And so our takeaway on that, it's a matter of pride, I think, for our community, but it also helps position town council in the best possible place for future decisions, whatever the future decisions town council may make. And so we want to take a moment to celebrate that. A little bit about accounts payable. Generally, we, for people who, for the audience here, we do have a June 30th year end. Generally, we look toward goods and services delivered before June 30th. Generally, what happens is we get billed in July, and so then those invoices are approved and turned back from the departments into finance for payment. And so generally we have a cutoff, and we ask our departments to turn all these in by July 31st. They're generally, we get vast majority of those in by July 31st, but then there's invariably a number that need to have some conversations with the vendors, whether it's the quality or the quantities of goods or services delivered, and they have those conversations with the vendors and work out those differences, and some of that spills over into August. And so we think we have a really good cutoff now for our June 30th, so our accounts payable is looking like we've achieved that, a good cutoff for June 30th. A little bit on our accounts receivable, just through our governmental accounting, we have kind of a 3-pronged test for our receivables. It needs to be due, measurable, and available. We generally will have our availability window open through July 31st. And so generally, if we receive funds through July 31st and it was due June 30th, then we'll accrue it back into June 30th. And so what happens from a practical standpoint is that most of our collections in July are booked back into June. And so if you look at July financial statements, there isn't a lot there because June will look almost like a double month for both spending and revenues, just because of the way that our mechanics of recording these transactions happen. So just an update, here we are reporting on fiscal 2026, and I felt like this would be good information as we kind of discuss that. But our finance department is working on, just saw it come across my desk, the compensated absences, accrued sick leave, OPEB, pension information, fixed assets, construction work in progress. All that happens after we get all our invoices in through accounts payable, but that's happening as we speak. And so I would like to report our revenues supported our budget comfortably for 2025. Our expenditures and expenses were within budget for 2025. We're still working on some of the details. We've got some categories to correct. We find a few things booked into the wrong place, and we do some of those corrections at the end of the year. We do those during the year if we find them, but we especially take a hard look at those at the end of the year, and we're doing that work right now. A little bit about 2026. We've got our budget posted for 2026. The town's departments are starting their work for 2026, so there's a lot of work to do, whether it's capital projects, whether it's just the normal good work that the departments are doing, and they're off and running. And there's much to do for 2026. A little bit about our audit too, because I do like to point to that. The town has engaged an independent auditor with Malden and Jenkins, and they'll do their audit for June 30th of 2025. And so we, the finance department, have been providing information to them already. So as we go through the closing process, we like that they can do as much work on the interim basis, and we like to make that as an ongoing conversation as much as possible. And so we provide information as early as we do so that they can do their work, all the work that they need to do. So generally our basic schedule is that we try to give them a clean trial balance, a June 30th trial balance by the end of August. It's coming up this week. And so we're in pretty good shape about that. September, between us and the auditors, we do a bunch of financial reporting schedules that are going to go into our annual report. October, our independent auditors come on site and they're here doing their work. They actually do a lot of work off-site, but October is the dedicated piece where they are on site. And then November, what we do is between us, the finance department and the outside auditors put together what we call an annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR, that you'll get to see the output. It's coming up. And so then our audit will be presented to town council at a regularly scheduled public meeting. So you'll get to see the official financial results, but you also get to see what the auditors feel are important financial components. They'll tell you some of that, and they'll also tell you about their findings. And so they'll anything that they found during the audit process, then they'll make that report to town council. And so as we work through these numbers, we're making really good progress on the what's, what are the numbers, and we're still doing some extra work on the whys of the numbers. And so that's happening. But all in all, I think that we have an excellent financial report. I do like to talk a lot about, or I guess a little bit of history. Part of a monthly financial report to the Finance and Administrative Committee. How did that start? How did we even start that? I started back in COVID, and during COVID, town council passed a budget for 2021, fiscal 2021, in early 2020. Of course, COVID had just started. Town council passed a budget, but was expecting one, that our revenue is going to support our budget. And there was a real nervousness about that. And do we need to make adjustments? The expectation is that we are going to make some adjustments. And the question was, how many adjustments do we need to make? And so those are the questions that our former Finance and Administrative Committee chair tried to get me to focus on in the monthly reports. Is, okay, how are we doing? Do we need to make any adjustment? And so answering those two questions, I know those are from another day, but answering those two questions, we're doing very well. And there's no need, in my opinion, to make any adjustments to the 2026 budget. We finished 2025 well. We're starting 2025, it's still very, very early, but we're starting 2026 very, very well. So there's no need to make adjustments. There's plenty of work that the budget supports the town to do. Moving right along, with that, just know that our 6 budgeted funds all reported an increase of fund balances, which is always good to report, and that helps to provide town council additional flexibility for your future decisions. And so with that, I'll open for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Troy. Ms. Bryson?
First of all, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I want to look at the charts that you provided to us. First of all, the one that's showing on the screen. Looks as though, and gosh, I think it's every category, we had an increase in receipts above what we forecast for the budget. So that's always good news to have more money.
Yes.
And then I did flip over to the next slide and look at, where we stand with regard to revenues and expenditures. It looks like we're in good stead there as well. And I know that we're still working on closing out fiscal year 25 through June 30. But it looks as though, and we have a CIP workshop coming up for full town council tomorrow. So I'm always looking at how much are we going to carry forward, and thinking about what's the best use of those funds? Do some of them need to go into our reserves? Do some of them need to go into the projects that we have planned for FY 26? So if you can help me out with the bottom line, it looks as though we have excess revenues of almost $15.6 million.
That's above budget. I like to look at the number just a little, one column to the left, the 12.8. That's a contribution to the fund balance, so it's a contribution to future town activities at town council discretion. We like to think of those as one-time savings, whether they're revenue above projections or spending below what was provided for in the budget. And you look at what was the number one thing that was less than budgeted on the spending side was open positions. The number 2 thing after that was a planned fire truck lease payments that were, our first payment is going to happen after the fiscal year. So those are one-time things. We're much closer to fully staffed now than we were some time ago, but we can appreciate that those savings happened, and we can talk, and I think those are really good conversations for town council, for finance and administrative committee to consider. We had a good year, and would we like to deploy those into reserves? Would we like to deploy those into capital projects? Would we like to save them for a rainy day or save them for a future decision? All of those are among the choices that you have.
Yeah, so based upon the numbers now in front of us, what's the amount based on the work to date that we would be looking for carrying forward to be able to spend in FY 26?
Well, part of what you could consider if you were to do that was the 12.8. It is good to keep some of that into to grow the fund balance, as our expectations of future budgets are going to grow, and it's our expectation that FY 27 budget will be more than FY 26, we think. And so that our policy, the town's policy, is based on the budget. And so a percentage of the budget, so our expectations is that the budgetary policy amounts will grow. And so that could help satisfy the policy as well.
So looking at, and I use the verb spend, that's probably improper in my thinking, allocate.
Yes.
So we're looking at 12.8
Yes.
as possible allocation of funds going forward.
Right, and the town council could reserve it. We want to set this money aside for a purpose.
In our savings account.
Yes.
All right, and so I'm assuming these will be the same numbers available for our workshop tomorrow as we look at
Sure.
what are the possibilities for the funds available and where should we think about allocating those funds.
Yes.
And the other thing, and I apologize for making you flip back to the previous slide. Yeah, thank you. And so in looking at the revenue streams, again, I noticed that comparing to budget, in the column, the FY '25 budget, the percent of budget plus or minus, it looks as though all of those exceeded what was budgeted, what was forecast. Am I correct in that? I see 106%, 139%, et
Right,
cetera.
yes.
Okay. And you go on down I think it would be helpful to know, particularly for the large increases. So I'm looking at business licenses. And it looks as though there was almost 4.9 million above what was budgeted. Am I reading that correctly now?
Yeah, and it includes, so part of that 4.9 includes the one-time Airbnb settlement funds.
Okay, thank you.
And so that's a piece of that. And so it's in the business license, it's in the local A tax, and it's in the beach fees as well. But that was part of the budget ordinance to take those funds and allocate those funds among those revenue categories.
Right. And while there was an active lawsuit and it was hoped for, it was not planned for at the time the budget was prepared. Okay.
Yes, and I think that's a really good way to say it as a part of the reason that we have an amount of revenues were greater than spending. Yeah, we had some one-time savings, but we also had some one-time revenues, and those are good news for town council to consider, yes.
And then the beach parking and services, an increase there. The town council did increase the fees, not even mid-year, past mid-year. So there's a substantial increase there, but not the same kind of increase we might be looking, if you compare year over year to next year. Is that correct?
Yeah, and more of that was planned for in '26 than what was planned for in '25. And so I would point to the bottom box and note that there's several that were less than the previous year. The first one on the list is a tax increment financing. And so basically we hit the cap, and so that limited what the town could collect. And so even though it's bracketed and a reduction from the previous year, I consider that a success because it collected all the money it was supposed to collect. We're happy. And this is all that we were supposed to collect. And we attained that in the second extension, or the first extension, the second phase of that TIF program. We noted hospitality tax gave us a little bit of pause. And when we looked at that, we contemplated that. It's like, well, wait a minute, everything's up, but hospitality is slightly down. We further went in and we looked at grocery receipts. Grocery receipts are up. And so what we're starting to think is like, well, people are eating in more than eating out. Okay. It's just a different economic picture. And so I think some of these numbers are helpful in just taking the pulse of the economy. And I think that's maybe a different way that people can spend their time on the island, is that they're spending their time eating in instead of eating out. We're seeing a little shift there. And it'll be interesting to follow that one closely. And then we talked earlier today about short-term rentals. It's not been in place that long, but this is the first reduction. Okay. That's interesting piece of information that we should all contemplate, and it's probably worth a discussion and probably worth us to dig in further and kind of analyze that further, because those are things that because there are so much against all the other trends, we'd want to know more.
So picking up on those last two, pardon me, the hospitality tax and short-term rental tax, short-term rental fees, and keeping an eye on those. So I know you'll keep an eye on them monthly, daily, whatever, however often you check in on them. But as far as this committee is concerned, when do you think we should say, hey, is there a trend here? And to your initial question that arose questions that arose during COVID, are there any adjustments we need to make during FY26 as a result of those changes in percentages?
My recommendation is that because the hospitalities was just very slight, that we really want to keep an eye on that. Short-term rentals, we really want to dig into that and really understand that reduction more. And so I think you'll get more information from us coming in the future about trying to understand why it's less. But just know that yeah, I would suggest to the F&A committee is that, okay, these are data points that we pay attention to, and we'll want to follow up and say, let's make sure to see how that is a month from now, 2 months from now, a quarter from now.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm thinking of after the first quarter of FY '26, which would include July, August, and September, which would include the peak, the last part of the peak summer months. We're taking a look at those and seeing what your report would show to us at that time, unless other committee members feel differently about that. But it looks as though that's when we should take another good look at it.
And one of the things that we were surprised at during the COVID process is that, or there used to be what was called a shoulder season that really didn't happen, is that people stayed surprisingly longer, and maybe we're getting kind of back to a little bit more of a shoulder season, maybe. But I think it certainly requires some more attention and some more follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my question.
Summer.
Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to see a familiar face. You pointed out a lot of the things that I was going to point out on this first slide, and I think it bears repeating in regards to the Airbnb settlement. So when we look at some of these numbers, like the business licenses and the local aid tax, for example, that's a good one. It shows that we're up $1.9 million, but we credited back $1.5 million from the Airbnb settlement. So really, we're only up, $460,000. So we need to keep that in mind as we take a look at these numbers. They're still strong, and they're still over the prior year, but those are one-time benefits that we will not be seeing moving forward. And thank you for digging in on the hospitality piece. That was one of the questions I had, because I was surprised by that, given that some of the other numbers are up, that the hospitality was down slightly. So thank you for digging in and seeing that grocery receipts are going up, and I'm assuming restaurants then are going down. And that's one of those things that we talk about in regards to short-term rentals, is that people perhaps are purchasing more groceries, eating in, and not going out to restaurants. So that is interesting that you observe that as well. In regards to our results on the next page, there was talk about the difference between revenues and expenses, and the fact that there was a benefit of $12.8 million. But if I heard you correctly, you said that July really is the month where we go back in and we code expenses that come in that haven't hit yet, hit in July, but then we code them back to the prior year. So that $12.8 million is not our actual, fiscal year end, because we will be having adjustments to those numbers as you, take those expenses and apply them back to the prior month.
Yeah, we expect some adjustments, but the number of adjustments is going down, and so it's getting, we're narrowing that, but yes, you're exactly right, our expectation is it will be adjusted, but not significantly.
Oh, well, I thought I heard you say that it would almost be like another month.
June, yes, but this incorporates that. And so most of the July accruals are in these numbers.
Okay, all right. And I was going to ask you if you use accruals or not.
And so it's odd, a little bit. Governmental accounting is a modified accrual basis, except for your government-wide statements. And then that's where we push everything into a full accrual basis, which is what most people would expect. And so during the year, though, any month to month is mostly on a cash basis, and then we move it to a modified accrual basis at June 30th. And so just know that as you see interim numbers, then that's what you're looking at.
All right, for all us accounting nerds out there. I figured I'd ask you since you brought it up. And then you also mentioned that one of the reasons why we're at $12.8 million is a fire truck lease did not come in as planned. How much was that worth?
It was above $800,000.
Okay, all right, so it wasn't that significant. Okay, All right, well, again, excellent business results. It is interesting when you look at our total revenue and where we've ended at $56 million, and then you go forward and you take a look at what our budget is. The town is very conservative in how they budget revenue, and the budget for the revenue next year is about $47 million in that category. So it just goes to show you how conservative you are in that planning.
Yes, and it gives us confidence to, when we look ahead, to say, okay, are we going to have enough revenue in '26 to support the budget? And we can comfortably say yes.
All right, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Troyer, welcome back. Looking forward to you sort of developing a new rhythm with this new committee, okay? And Ms. Bryson brought up, first quarter reporting. I think that's important that we sort of go in that direction. One of the things that I wanted to sort of make a statement about, you mentioned that we started this exercise during COVID. And
We did.
I mean, we can define COVID as a crisis to some degree, right? I'm glad that this process has started. I'll also add that we're not always going to be in that level of a crisis. And the question before you as the finance director and the town manager was, well, what, if anything, do we need to change, okay? And I can imagine there were conversations about personnel layoff or cutting back on CIP projects and so on. We're in a different day now, and I'm not quite sure that we're looking to ask you about those type of recommendations as far as manipulating our budget if we need to, okay? However, there are some hot topic items at the moment that could give the town some financial heartburn, okay? We talked about business license, and take aside the settlement, let's really look at what that looks like and what some of the businesses that are supporting that line item are doing, okay? You mentioned that restaurants may be down, okay? Well, I think as we're making decisions in the future, we need to be very conscious of that, all right? So I'm trying to plant a seed here as far as how we look at the numbers moving forward, because to me, the numbers are trust and verifying for us, okay? They are what they are. We can have conversations about the sky falling down on a number of topics, but the numbers are what they are, and the decisions that we make will affect the numbers down the road. And I'd also like to point out to the public, that effect is just a percentage as far as our collections are concerned. When it comes to business licenses and taxes that we take in, that's just a percentage of the picture. The bigger economic picture are those that are contributing to the cause, okay? And what their economics look like, what their bottom lines look like, I think is important for us as we move forward. So I just wanted to make that statement, not a question, not looking for you to respond, Mr. Troyer, just wanted to say that out loud, and definitely looking forward to our first quarter report.
Yeah, town council spent a lot of time going through the priorities for the 2026 budget. There's no reason not to proceed with that full speed ahead on the 2026 budget. This gives you a little bit of flexibility as we go forward if issues come up during the year, or that helps position town council as you consider the 2027 budget. And so you've got a lot of options, and I think that's the heart of my report.
Thank you, sir. I have two other council members with us today, Ms. Becca, Mr. Alfred. Any comments or questions on the financial report at this point? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, we will move on to our new business. Consideration of resolution delineating names and areas of focus for town council subcommittees. And Mr. Sean Colin, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members, council members in the audience. All right, let's have a little fun with this item. The last naming exercise I had was for our puppy we got in June. It was relatively easy. We had one dog named Frank. We got a smaller dog, and its name is Beans, so Frank and Beans. So hopefully this naming is straightforward and painless as possible. So as you all know, Town Council adopted change to the municipal code that provided some additional clarity on how standing committees of council would be governed, basically. Council authorized 2 or more standing committees to be created, that the names would be adopted by resolution of town council, along with what I would say is the general program of work or areas of focus. And so what was before you in your staff report and packet for this meeting went through and I took some liberties on some names. So right now, there were 3 committees of town council currently. One has not been active for the past many months. 2 committees are active, Finance and Administrative Committee, which we're at today, and then the Community Services and Public Safety Committee, which Councilwoman Becker chairs, and they handle some additional work of the town. What we tried to do is there's never been a formal delineation of those areas of focus. There's been sort of general work areas that have changed over the years as we've gone from 6 to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 committees now. And so the primary purpose of these committees is, and the naming in particular, is so that members of the public and staff generally know which committees are going to handle which types of business. And so I don't want to get caught up on the words too much, but I do want to get them right so that members of the public generally know what types of business are going to each committee. As you heard, you got the financial update this morning from John Troyer. You heard from Alan Wolf as it related to funding approval, grant funding approval from the South Carolina ATAX Fund to CCDC, which are financial matters. And so obviously that makes some sense to come to the Finance Administrative Committee. I will say that as we go through and what I put together was trying to give you a general mission. And then the areas of focus, if you looked at the resolution, there were 8, 10 items under each committee. But in the staff report, I try to roll them up into some general categories. And what I've included for consideration and to start the discussion were to keep the Finance Administrative Committee name the same as it currently is, and that the Community Services and Public Safety Committee name for consideration would be Community Development and Public Services Committee, because I think that more accurately represents the work below it or under, in general, its authority. And we can come and hopefully finalize a recommendation from the committee to town council. I have no dog in the fight. Frank and Beans aren't here to help me with this. So I have no dog in the fight, and quite frankly, I think if the committee can settle on names that they feel are appropriate for the work that they'd like to conduct from a council body standpoint, in support of the strategic plan and the work that's in front of you, then and we'll advance that to town council, okay? So in general, the Finance Administrative Committee handles financial matters, including revenue and expenditures, does get involved a little bit in the procurement process. We had the small business minority owned program. I think we brought some of that through committee for recommendation. And generally, the Finance Administrative Committee has handled intergovernmental agreements with county, with Beaufort, Jasper Housing Trust, those types of things that are beyond the walls here at Town Hall with other governmental agencies. Also, our affiliated agency agreements, and so DMO has been part of the discussion at Finance Administrative Committee in the past. Our arrangements with Island Rec Center and some others. So In general, that's kind of been what's underneath the purview. Also, anything related to pending legislation. As items come through the State House, there may be a need to get a position from town council. Sometimes we bring those directly to council for a resolution opposing offshore drilling, but sometimes they need a little bit more vetting and input from town council if they're going to impact our operations and funding. So those types of things have been brought through the Finance Administrative Committee. And then more recently, with our partnership in creating the Gullah Geechee Historic Neighborhoods Community Development Corporation, as the town continues to support and have that organization connected, having some oversight and input on matters related to that corporation. So that's what's folded into the mission. A little bit more detail on the areas of focus. But as you can see, it's on the financial oversight, those items that I just mentioned, intergovernmental relationships, and then oversight of the town's destination marketing organization, DMO. And then as you look at, and I'll put this out there, as you look at the strategic plan, there's some goals that town council adopted that seem to fit almost perfectly within that, under that umbrella. I do want to point out that when you get down to the action items, some of the action items might be appropriate for Finance and Administrative Committee or whatever the name is, and there might be a couple action items that need to go to the other committee. So just want you to understand that some things within a goal may need to go to different committees, but in general, I think there's some opportunity for some alignment. Can we just put back my staff report? I'll bring this up in a minute. And then, so that's Finance Administrative, or whatever the committee recommends to Town Council. Community Development and Public Services Committee. As a part of this exercise, and it was brought up when council considered the recommendation to do 2 or more rather than have the 3 committees. Public Planning Committee was in play until beginning of this year, but that one was not populated. Public Planning Committee, which had been planning and development standards before that, handled most planning related or code related items. And I say code, it was primarily items that were associated with the land management ordinance or building code. Municipal code amendments still typically went to a different committee, whether it was the Finance Committee or intergovernmental. But land management ordinance codes, building codes typically went to the planning development standards, which became public planning. So, as we tried to look at the work of 3 committees to funnel that down into 2 umbrellas under these 2 committees, and then looking at the strategic plan and trying to put together something that made sense. So for the Community Development and Public Services Committee, that is typically like utilization of town properties, the CIP, so infrastructure, facilities, and then also some services. So we took integrated pest management through what was the community services and public safety. We've taken operations like the trolley service to public planning. That would be appropriate here under a service. Looked at community development related items or community related items such as parks, recreation, arts, culture, those types of items going through that committee. Emergency preparedness efforts, so operational items as it relates to the services that we provide. And then there's been the personnel. So it used to be a personnel committee, handle all appointments to boards, committees, task forces, and commissions. The personnel or appointments to boards and committees have been handled by that community services. So they're still folded into this community development public services committee. It would handle the zoning, land use, workforce housing development that were under public planning under this current proposal. but certainly open to input from the committee, and we'll provide a recommendation to council based on your recommendation. I won't go through too much more. I think you see what's in front of you, and I hope you understand that in general, what I'm trying to get with sort of two umbrellas and areas of work. And I know that we've had some conversations since the packet went on about some options that may be in front of us. So I'd like to hear from the committee, what your ideas are, and then like to deliver what you recommend to town council. And I think Mr. Leininger will bring this through town council next month based on what you come up with. I do have, Zendaya, if you want to pop it up, that other one sheet. I did grab the page from our strategic action plan that lists the 10 goals, because that was a comment that I received offline before the meeting, and do have this here if that's something you want to have available. So, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer questions, and then let's work this out so that we have a positive recommendation to council that delivers what you expect, okay?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the report, and I hope that Franken Beans will do as well as you will in the future. Although when I go to a picnic, I'm a vegetarian, I always look for the veggie burgers, but I have never named a dog Veggie Burger. So, there you go, how's that?
Perfect.
Tit for tat. So I'm glad you left this slide up, because that's actually where I want to start. When we had our strategic plan workshop in February, I remember the consultant was leading us through a discussion about the town council committees. And one of the things that I was advocating for, and that is more flexibility, which we achieve through the amendments to the municipal code, rather than naming committees and then trying to figure out what goes where, what item goes where, to have the flexibility of at least 2 standing committees, meaning that we could have 2, 3, however many we might need. And instead of then adopting strategic action plan goals and shoehorning them through named committees, that we instead, I said that was turning the process on its head. Once we decide on the goals, then is when we should establish the committees. And that's in essence what we're doing now. So with that being said, I then looked at these 10 strategic plan goals and said, okay, if we're going to use 2 buckets, assuming that there are 2 committees, and what I've also consistently said is I'm okay with 2 as long as the work is balanced. But in looking at a prior proposal that came before this committee, the work was unbalanced. So when I looked at this list, two definite streams emerged in my head and looking at them. And this committee, or a committee, would be Finance and Economic Development instead of Finance and Administrative. I've always wondered why we were called administrative, because that's really the job of the town manager and his staff. So Finance and Economic Development, and in looking at this list, then I would place the following goals under Finance and Economic Development. The first one is number 5, support economic development and business recruitment and retention, which seems to fit with Finance and Economic Development. And then the second one, because it relates to the Gullah culture and businesses on the island and economic development of the Gullah on the island, then I would put number 7, preserve, protect, and celebrate Gullah Geechee culture and heritage. And then because workforce drives our economy, I would put number 8, advance workforce housing opportunities under Finance and Economic Development Committee. And then the last one I put under there is protect and enhance environmental sustainability, because the sustainability of our environment will drive our economy as well. So those are the 1, 2, 3, 4 that I would pick out of the list of 10 to go to Finance and Economic Development. And to that, I would add the usual type of work, and that is reviewing financial reports as we've done today. I would also note that during our strat plan workshop in February, another goal was mentioned, and that is seeking alternative revenue sources. So although that's not included as a separate goal, I see it folding into the work of the Finance and Economic Development Committee. So I'd add those line items at least to the list of focus areas. Then the other committee work that I see is driven by 4 of the remaining 6, I think, goals under Strategic Action Plan goals. And that is, I see a lot of public safety and also infrastructure emphasis. So I would name the other committee Public Safety and Infrastructure. And under that, there would be number 2, invest in stormwater management infrastructure. And there would be number 3, enhance major corridors and streets. It would be number 4, enhance public safety readiness and facilities. And then because island resilience deals both with stormwater infrastructure and with recovery, infrastructure recovery and public safety from future shocks and stressors is what is described under there, including weather events, environmental pressures, and natural disasters. So those are the 4 areas, 4 goals that I would include under public safety and infrastructure. And then in addition to that, the traditional functions of another committee, and that is managing appointments to boards, commissions, and committees, I would add. Then with regard to number 10, enhance community well-being through implementation of Parks and Rec master plan and program enhancements. A large part of that is going to be operational if you look at the action steps under the strategic action plan. But there may be some that has to do with infrastructure of the parks and maybe public safety of the parks. So I added review of infrastructure and safety of Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Now, that leaves number 1, protect island character through managing growth. The way I see that is a very large goal with a lot of action steps. And what I do understand is that the town council is going to be looking at setting up an LMO task force in September. And so a lot of that work would go through that task force as opposed to one of the 2 committees. So that's where I would put number 1. And I would say to go to the task force and of course to the town council. And then there may be some elements of, in addition to LMO rewrite, there may be some interim actions that need to be taken with regard to managing growth, pardon me, such as amendments to the municipal code for short-term rentals, such as do we need to do something else with regard to subdivision size, lot sizes. And so in that case, I think we have to make a determination as to which one of those fits best under which committee, as opposed to assigning them all to one committee or the other, because in the concept of balancing, we don't want to overload one committee one way with putting all of growth management there. Instead, send it on the LMO task force and town council with perhaps specific action steps being assigned to whichever committee it's appropriate. So I know I just ripped apart your proposal, but I think you gave us a skeleton to work with, and that's what I was trying to do. In that, I would then revise the resolution, address those, is what I would propose. And the last small technical thing in the resolution is there is a paragraph that says, number 5, rules and procedures, and that's actually repetitive from the municipal code, so I would just strike that all together. That talks about may establishing rules and procedures. Also may. Mr. Chair, I know that's a lot, but there is a lot before us to consider, and I want to focus on doing the work of a 3-year strategic action plan as opposed to 1 year of assignment to committees, because this does take care of fiscal year 26, 27, and 28 under the strat plan. And I recognize that there may need to be some adjustments during that time because we may need to adjust some things in the strat plan. But I think this gives us a strong foundation to move forward in accomplishing our strategic plan.
All right. First of all, in regards to the name, I like the change, the proposed change to finance and economic development, although FAC makes probably a better acronym than FED. You go from, almost sounds like fact,
Yeah.
and now it's Fed. So for what that's worth. But no, I think it clearly describes what we should be focusing on. My desire to focus on economic development. So I think by stating that, it really calls it out in regards to where we want to focus. I also, one of the things that I think is interesting is if we think about the flow of work, anything from the planning commission should flow through, it feels like anything that goes through the planning commission should flow through the second team, which is the Community Development and Public Services Committee or whatever that name is. One of the things that I was thinking about as well is municipal code and where that should fit. And you said that in the past, finance has been involved in municipal code, so that could be something to consider as well. And I agree with your comment that when we look at, and I looked at all the action items underneath each individual strategic plan goal, there probably is the opportunity to pick out specific tactics and have them align to different teams. So one of the things that I was looking at was, assessing the feasibility of island trolley and beach shuttle system. And part of that feasibility is the economics associated with it. That might be a good add for the finance and economic development team to take a look at. And so we would need to go through that process. Beyond that, I am not going to comment because I really want to hear from my fellow town council members that have joined us today and hear what their opinions are regarding the division of work.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Turner. Just one question. I just want to make sure we're providing some clarity as far as outcome is concerned here. When it comes to setting agendas around a strategic action plan, the mayor has the liberty, with the exception of if town council decides to take formal action on adding something to an agenda, has the liberty to set in the agendas at the town council level as well as committee levels. Am I correct in that statement?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, okay, all right, sounds good. Okay, we will ask, ladies first, Ms. Becca. Are you giving me sign language that you don't have anything to say? Is that what that meant, Mr. Alfred?
I do not have anything to say. At the moment, I'd like to see Ms. Bryson's recommendations in writing.
Good morning.
Morning.
And thank you for the opportunity to respond to what I've listened to. I'd like to remind us as a town council that our job is to set policy. And it's not to micromanage the town manager's work and the staff that he assigns it to. And so the detail-oriented list that I just listened to, in my opinion, strays out of our box. And I think that we need to keep in mind our goals. Chair, what I heard you say was a reminder that in fact, it is the mayor's, one of his enhanced duties beyond what we all do with our singular vote, to assign items to agendas as he sees them necessary to go to those. And I think a lot of that is in collaboration with the town manager as he sees the staff's work as well. So it's a little bit more, and I would love when I'm talking if people would pay attention. That's just a common courtesy. But beyond that, what I think the names are fine. What's in a name? Quite honestly, I don't think we need to get wrapped up around that. I am concerned about the fact that we're whittling down these to two committees. Though if we have two committees, that's the way they should stay. As it is, you see that the previous agreement that we would all contribute at the committee level, regardless if we sit on the committee or not, is open and available, and I appreciate that. So the committee names are fine as is. Sean, you did a good job. Thank you. The assignments of the duties, as Sean outlined, I think is also appropriate, given what I'd said previously about staying in our box, staying in our lane, however you'd like to say it, and the collaboration that the mayor takes with the town manager in terms of setting the agendas. And part of that discussion, I'm certain, is based on the workload. So I just want to make that statement here, and I'll be ready to prepare a better statement later.
Thank you. Okay. Anna, you wanted to wait to hear from council members before you made additional comments. Do you have anything else to add after listening to Councilwoman Becker has proposed?
I don't have any additional comments.
Okay, all right. Have anything else to add? I've got some thoughts here that I want to give Sean, but I want to make sure I'm hearing from everybody first.
Sure. With regard to strategic action plan goals, those are policy decisions. And I think, and I apologize to Mr. Alfred, if you want to see my handwritten version of what I just read out, I'm happy to share that with you for you to take a look at, to comment. I'd be happy to type it up or have it typed up by one of our staff members for folks to take a look at. At any rate, and I'm happy to go back through anything in the list that would be helpful. And as I sit here, I make a lot of notes. I may not be looking at you, but I'm listening to you and making notes.
Okay, so Ms. Golan, this is what I'm sort of thinking here, okay? Obviously, we want to keep in mind that we want efficiency, I think, is one of our main goals, to be able to move things along, all right? And as we look at our strategic action plan, obviously there are 10 goals, but when we start to get into the nuts and bolts of that, there's a lot more on the table, okay? Some of which will come directly to council, some of which will stand for workshops, growth management. Obviously, we're going to be considering a task force to help us deal with components of that. So there's a lot on the table here. And I'm sort of where you are with Frank and Beans. I want to try to simplify this as much as possible so that we can continue to move on with the very important work that's included in this plan, okay? And I sort of preface that again with the mayor's ability to move stuff accordingly, okay? So, you know, I'm okay with the names either way, and I think I'm hearing from my colleagues up here that, you know, making some slight changes to the names is okay for us to recommend to town council for consideration. I think it was finance and economic development, and the other one was public safety and infrastructure. You know, I think we can propose that to town council and see what we get, okay? But as far as the duties are concerned, yeah, as I went through the packet, I was more focused on mission. Very broad to a degree, and I think it gave us a lot of flexibility in knowing that we want to point back to action plan as a guide as we're determining where we're going to move things. So I know Ms. Bryson has mentioned that I think 4.5, so we have to describe it, to one committee and the other. I guess what I'm asking you, Mr. Colin, is there a way to incorporate the strategic plan into the missions and that we not get so detailed with the areas of focus with the bullets? I'm just posing a question to staff.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think Ms. Bryson did a good job in summarizing. So if I were to take a crack at the 10 goals, I had them 4 and 6, knowing that Parks and Recreation is more operational, and also LMO historically had gone through the public planning and/or now the community services. So I certainly think there's a way to fold that into the umbrella statement and not get into itemizing every line item. Again, I don't think a resolution should, the mayor will use it as a guide. But if we put goals, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that go to the committee, I think generally the items could go that way. I think if we were programming these for a committee, they're gonna go just about along the lines that Ms. Bryson had outlined or is included generally in the packet material before you. Long answer, Chairman Brown, but yeah, absolutely. Those items that are included in the goals, outlined in goals adopted by town council, could be rolled into an overarching mission with those general categories, very clear, to guide the assignments to committee. Yes, sir.
Bryson, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I have maybe a suggested compromise of trying to fold these ideas into one, and that is, and now I'm going to take the resolution. If you could put the resolution up on the screen. That's what we're going to be recommending. So what I would suggest is to change the names to Finance and Economic Development Committee and Public Safety and Infrastructure Committee. So that would appear in the third whereas, and also under number 1, under the resolution. Number 2 under the resolution. Then with regard to missions and areas of focus, what I would suggest, and I'm not going to go through line by line how to change this, but to take out areas of focus
Yes.
and only include mission. And what I would suggest that we do with regard to mission, include under the Finance and Economic Development Committee, if they're not already included under mission, from the strat plan, the goals, support economic development and business recruitment and retention. And clerk, I'll just say which numbers they are. So that would be number 5. And then number 7, which is preserve, protect, and celebrate Gullah Geechee culture and heritage. I think there's some of that language already in there. I just want to make sure these are included. Then number 8, advance workforce housing opportunities. Number 9, protect and enhance environmental sustainability. If they're not included under the Public Safety and Infrastructure Committee, I would include number 2, strat plan invest in stormwater management infrastructure. Number 3, enhance major corridors and streets. Number 4, enhance public safety readiness and facilities. Number 6, reinforce island resilience. And to the extent, and I think the other items I mentioned, except for seeking alternative revenue sources, I would include that under the mission of Finance and Economic Development. With regard to number 1, protect island character through managing growth, I would put that under both committees. Mayor and manager then deciding which way to direct which topic. And then with regard to number 10, I would leave that off of either. Ask for reaction to that from my colleagues, and if that seems to be a consensus idea, I'd be prepared to make a motion.
Donna.
It's getting complicated. So what I hear you saying is you want to remove the areas of focus as they're listed today and identify them based off of the strategies of the strategic plan. what that does, when I look at the list of areas of focus for finance, is remove a lot of items that aren't considered in the strategic plan. So, that's where I get a concern. You know, DMO isn't listed as a strategic item, but it's a big piece of what we do, the accommodations and hospitality taxes, et cetera. So I'm afraid by stripping all that out and just aligning to the strategic plan items, we're missing key pieces of what it is that we're focusing on. So that's my initial reaction to that
If I
proposal.
could say, what I was saying was to remove areas of focus and to use the existing mission statement and to add elements from the strat plan. So not taking out, so if you look at Finance Administrative Committee, it does have, I agree, ATAX, DMO, and other matters in there. So I'd leave all those in there and then add those elements from the strat plan.
So I think, and you can help me translate here, Mr.
Yeah,
Coley.
absolutely. Well, that's what I understood, I think, was adding to the mission, eliminating the areas of focus. But to have those references particularly assigned, for the goals assigned. Again, my 4 and 6, if we say 10 is operational, then it was 4 and 5, and then LMO. I agree, LMO includes some other amendments as well. Ms. Tunner, you mentioned municipal code. It always depended on needed the context of municipal code, like flood regulations typically went through planning and development standards because it impacted development. But if you're talking about operations or fees for parking, that went to finance administrative. So I think the municipal code has always been sort of a split assignment. And then LMO typically has gone to one committee, but that's going to be a high order of magnitude lift and you're going to have the benefit of the LMO task force to help. You're also going to have the planning commission that's required to be part of that process as well. So chairman, committee members, yeah, I understand it would be the mission statements generally as they're written there to include the remaining goals assigned as identified by Ms. Bryson, if there's no objection. And then you would know the general assignments for those action items for those goals would go, knowing that the mayor ultimately, right, has that authority and working with committee chairs to set agendas.
Apologize, Ms. Tunner, if I interrupt your train of thought. I wanted to come back and try to explain what I had not artfully done before. So.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're comfortable with there not being any omission of things that are currently being taken care of that would fold into a reconstructed mission of words?
Correct.
Yes, okay, all right, perfect. Okay. On to ask for a motion, then I'm going to open it up for public comment here, okay?
I would move to recommend for adoption a resolution of the town council to establish standing committees to approve committee names and to delineate areas of focus for each committee by revising the draft in front of us. Change the 2 committee names to be Finance and Economic Development, Public Safety and Infrastructure. And also make the same with regard to missions and areas of focus. After making the name changes, to remove the sections called areas of focus and to add to the mission statement following: for finance and economic development, add action plan goal number 5, support economic development and business recruitment and retention. Number 7, preserve, protect, and celebrate Gullah Geechee culture and heritage. Number 8, advance workforce housing opportunities. Number 9, protect and enhance environmental sustainability. Number one, protect island character through managing growth. And for the mission statement for public safety and infrastructure, to add from the strategic action plan goals. Number two, invest in stormwater management infrastructure. Number three, enhance major corridors and streets. Number four, enhance public safety readiness and facilities. Number six, reinforce island resilience. Number one, protect island character through managing growth. And I would also, and I left out, I'm sorry, add to the mission statement of finance and economic development, pursue alternative revenue sources. And on the draft resolution before us, to delete number 5, rules and procedures. A motion.
Okay, Bryce, you went through a lot there, so I'll make sure we did not miss the, your motion at the beginning is that we revise to include what you have rolled off, but I want to make sure that we're giving the committee comfort and the items that were in areas of focus that should be folded into the mission focus. The examples Ms. Turner mentioned earlier. Yes.
So that's clarification of my motion, to include the draft mission statement and to include or add those that I listed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, understood.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it so that we can have conversation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Turner. Okay. We will open up the public comment. Has anybody signed up? No? Anyone else want to comment on this particular item? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back. No, it's not general. This is this particular item. Sure.
Good morning, Dave Ferguson. I just want to say, wow, you know, as an experienced executive coach, what I just listened to is, you made my case of what I spoke about at the town council meeting last week, that is this strategic plan a distraction? Because it sounds like all you're doing is administratively trying to move things around. And why would you recommend that the mission statement of your committee be based on a strategic plan that changes sometimes the number of times we change a baby's diaper? Really think through what you're asking. And to say you don't want to be called administrative, everything I just heard was administrative. Why make a strategic plan if you're just going to have meetings about meetings and now you just want to move things around on your committees and change this number to that number? I think you're making a big mistake, and I think it ends up exactly where I said you would end up when I spoke at town council meeting. You won't accomplish any goals. And once again, the residents of this town will be let down due to poor leadership.
Okay. All right. Additional discussion.
Nothing for me.
Okay. I also want to remind us that we are taking this time to make a recommendation to town.
Yes, sir.
At that point, what's on the table will have been before all members of council, and there will be opportune time for us to make a collective decision if this is the direction that we want to go, okay? I would just add before we call the question here, spent, I guess, 2 days talking about the strategic plan. We also had a workshop around it. Ultimately, we made the decision to approve it. I have not asked Mr. Orlando to share his proudful spreadsheet of all the items and what the pipeline looks like as far as the amount of meetings that will have to take place in order for us to accomplish the goals within, okay? And nor am I going to ask him for that. But I want us to be mindful that there's a lot of work before us. Again, this is simply a recommendation for some guidance. At the end of the day, the mayor does make the call as far as what goes where, and that decision could be wrapped around efficiency, okay, more than areas of focus at the end of the day, right? So I just want to make sure we're clear on that piece, all right? So with that being said, I am prepared to call a question here if there's no more discussion from my colleagues. No? Okay. Ms. Bryce has made the motion. Ms. Turner has second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand, please. Okay. And opposed? Clear? Ms. Zendaya, thank you. All right. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Michelle Bunce, our Senior Grants Administrator on Community Development Block Grant Entitlement Program. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. It is a great day to be here. So this is the required 5-year consolidated plan. As an entitlement community, you guys are required to submit these plans every 5 years. And it's interesting you guys were talking about the strategic plan because that is actually what a consolidated plan really is essentially. It is a strategic plan. It's based on data. A lot of the data is provided already by HUD and the American Community Survey, which is also census data. So this plan is templated from HUD, just to give you some little background on it. In 2015, of course, you guys know probably better than I do, the town actually started participating in the CDBG entitlement program. And on May 14th, 2025, HUD issued actually our allocation for program year 2025, which was in the amount of $210,564. And that is required to be part of this plan as well, which we'll talk about. The 2025-2029 consolidated plan will cover the town's third year, 5-year plan, which is kind of weird, third 5-year plan. It is required to participate in the program. The town must prepare it every 5 years and gather public input through its development. So we do hold public meetings. We actually obtain public comment through emails, phone calls, whatever way we can grab it, which is wonderful. We did learn throughout this process that that's an area for improvement. We'd like to see more people participate in the public meetings for the CDBG program. We think would be a huge value. So I've worked with other staff already on ways we can improve that a lot. And I'm excited to kind of get going on that particular project. So just know that we are working on that and recognize that as an area of a major improvement. The public needs assessment meeting took place on May 22nd, 2025, which is a requirement as well. Feedback was collected. The consolidated plan was drafted based on the input that we did receive, but we also took into account a lot of the input that you guys received from the last plan as well, because we saw after we reviewed it that it was still very relevant to this particular plan as well. So we did take that in consideration. Then the plan was basically sent back out for more comment on June 10th of 2025. So that was a 30-day comment period. So this is all requirements for the program. The consolidated plan is implemented through annual action plans. So when you do your 5-year consolidated plan, it automatically includes your first year action plan, which is for 2025. So that's just an automatic, it's included in this plan. The next year's action plan, 26, will be a separate document. So just to explain that. The action plan provides a concise summary of the actions, activities, and specific federal and non-federal resources that you use for funding. Identifies your needs and specific goals. For this particular year, program year 2025, the action plan proposes allocating all of its 2025 funds to Taylor Park to continue supporting that project in its planning, design, and implementation phase, and to kind of provide some of that critical momentum to keep pushing that forward. And that does align with the budget, strategic plan, all of that. We make sure that it aligns with that. For years 2 through 5, the plan outlines broad goals such as public facilities and improvements, public services, housing activities, economic development, and program administration. We always want to make sure we include that. Specific projects associated with these goals will be developed annually in alignment with this plan, the town's strategic plan, and the town's budget. And also, we took into account, obviously, the town's comprehensive plan. We take in all the plans that we have, which was a great learning experience being new to the town. Learned quite a bit going through some of those documents. The 2025-2029 five-year consolidated plan was submitted to HUD by July 13th. That was a required deadline that we had to meet. So some of our meetings were canceled, and so that kind of delayed the process. But at the same time, this document is now in HUD review for 45 days. So this is a great time for you guys to review and provide any comment and feedback as well. Once the plan's accepted, there will be a grant agreement. Hopefully we will get next month. Typically, that's the time period where you would get it. We'll come back before you to accept the HUD funding agreement, which is for that $210,000 that I mentioned earlier. We can submit amendments at any time. Just to know, this plan actually is very flexible. So even though it's already been submitted to HUD, we can make changes to this. If there are substantial changes, what HUD considers substantial, then we have to just have public comment periods. So it's really a very flexible plan, which is wonderful because, you know, as we just mentioned, things can change. So it allows for that. So the plan was written to provide for that flexibility. So when we talked about the program years ahead of us, we put in all those different uses so that the town can look at each year separately and independently and say, what are our needs this year? Is it to continue funding the parks, which is really strategically funding the parks is a good move because it's kind of a really, to say, I don't know, in a simple way, it is more streamlined to use the funding for the park projects. You don't run into a lot of the other requirements such environmental reviews sometimes if we're just doing design and implementation. When you're doing housing, we have to do things such as environmental reviews or, you know, very in-depth income checks. There's a lot of things to that. We did meet with a HUD rep from the Great Plains area with the mayor last week to get some more information about utilizing HUD housing funding as well as other opportunities to, you know, what the town can look for and kind of discuss, you know, as opportunities to look at that for the future if we don't decide to use the CDBG funding in itself, that there are other avenues the town can take. And so it was a great resource to meet with the HUD rep and see what those opportunities were. And he did mention that HUD right now, just like a lot of other federal programs, are undergoing review right now. So there could be a lot of changes coming down, which could be great changes that will benefit local governments and how they can utilize CDBG funding much more efficiently and without a lot of the kind of the constraints that we feel sometimes that kind of hold our projects back, such as housing. Housing can be held back quite dramatically because of timing constraints with this kind of funding. But the next step would be the funding agreement, and then also next step will also be our CAPER program, or the plan, which is basically the assessment of what actions you guys took place last year. So that'll be the next assessment. But other than that, that is a quick summary of that big, long plan. I hope you guys enjoyed that big read. It's a short document, if you haven't seen it. It's very short. It was my first experience actually writing this. I learned quite a bit, and we'll start a lot earlier next time for sure, because I think it deserves a lot of time spent on this, especially with the new strategic plan. I think we can really improve this plan as well for next time.
Hey.
I'd be happy to go first. Thank you, Michelle, for presenting this. It is a wealth of information.
Yes.
And actually, I learned a lot by reading it because it has a level of detail that we don't normally see in understanding what our community looks like. So I appreciated that. One of the things that I think about is, you know, it's $210,000. You know, we potentially have that for 5 years, so it adds up to quite a significant fund. And although I know the park is a wonderful idea, I wonder if we could use this money for other needs that we have in our community. needs that are listed and identified as we think about sewer connection,
Yes.
home repair programs. We're looking for grants to support those programs. And so I'd love for us to think about other strategies. I'm not saying that we necessarily want to change it today. When is this
So this
actually
is al-
due?
This has already been submitted.
been
It had to
submitted,
be.
so it is-
By July, but we
Okay.
can make amendments to it as long
Okay.
as they're not considered substantial.
All right, so this has already been submitted. So I'd like for us to think about that moving forward. But you do bring up some great points in that depending on how this money is used, it might create even more work on behalf of the town to be able to do that. So I think it'd be a healthy discussion to understand how we might be able to use it differently in the future and what that might mean in regards to extra workload.
Absolutely. And we'll be happy to provide more information. The meeting that we had with the HUD rep and the mayor was very beneficial. He offered a lot of different options to look at to help with our housing option, whether it was the home safety repair or other programs, things that we hadn't really discussed yet. And so those, we'd be happy to put more information together to look at, CDBG funding versus other options to address those for sure.
I think about Muddy Creek infrastructure. I mean, I think there are a lot of things that we might be able to consider moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yes, I thank you for your work, and I do appreciate that, and definitely is a lengthy document. It's not my favorite document to read, but at any rate. But I echo comments that Ms. Turner has made, and that is about other uses of funds. I'm not going to advocate for amending it.
Sure.
But I do agree that we need to look for funding for those kind of home repairs and sewer connections, because it helps so many folks, and it also helps our community, especially when you think of sewer overflow. So I hope that we'll continue to look for funding for those important elements in our community. And the other question that I had was about the July 13 deadline. And is it typical that we don't act on this until after the deadline, or?
No, there was some a lot of the federal programs were kind of on a little bit of a delay because of a lot of the changes that are ongoing. And then we had some changes in some of our meetings being canceled, so it was just kind of like a perfect storm. Normally, you would see this before, yes.
But not unusual. Not on purpose, but not unusual.
No, but the nice thing is, that's why I wanted to make sure that, I brought out the fact that it is flexible and you can make changes. It's just going through public meeting, which is not a bad thing at all, trying to get more feedback by any means. So,
All right. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bryson. So storytelling here. So you mentioned in the staff report that the town started to participate in this program in 2015. And obviously, our community has changed a lot when we think about 2015 to now. In particular, around our average median income. Community Block Grant is associated with AMI.
correct.
My understanding that we are grandfathered in to a degree
Yes,
to
sir.
continue to receive funds, okay?
Yes, sir.
The point in my story is that I agree with my colleagues as far as we start to develop our next budget around initiatives that are in our strategic plan, okay? Affordable housing is one. The only way that we're going to maintain an AMI level is through affordable housing. And there are components that come along with that, okay? And some of those have been mentioned here today with sewer connections and home repair. And I know that we learned a lot when we stood up our own program through ARPA funding. So I would be curious, and I'm asking that staff be prepared at some point in a future meeting to help us better understand the differences between what we were already working on as far as distributing funding and what would be additional with these type of funds, okay? And if the qualifications line up at all. I know that in order to be approved for home repair, you had to fit within a certain AMI. Well, how does that line up with what HUD is suggesting, okay? So just a little bit more information
similar.
for us, as we move forward.
Sure.
With not just changing this plan, okay, because there may be some changes here, but just that understanding helps us as we program that out moving forward with our next fiscal budget as well, okay?
Perfect. Absolutely. Happy to do that.
Okay.
And provide more information to you on other funding sources. One of the things we looked at when we discussed HUD funding with the rep was the timeliness of HUD funding sometimes can be the challenge too. And we do have a timeliness requirement to expend these funds, which luckily we have expended everything just about right now, except for about 100,000 that we're looking at, but everything else has been expended. So we've done really well and met that timeliness requirement. And sometimes that's where the housing, what we've seen has been the challenge, is that timeliness. But it's not that it can't be overcome, it's just planning. But definitely we'll be happy to provide more information on that.
What is that?
We'd like to learn more as well.
What is that requirement in regards to spend? Do you need to spend it in that fiscal year or?
No, you have longer. So you can have up to like 2-3 years. It just depends on the project, yeah. And if you've, submitted any kind of extension request or anything of that nature. So,
Okay,
Sorry, so you said there's about 100,000?
it's about 100,000 is what's left in the Ford Shellring project, which is actually for the town's portion of that project. We feel as we are done with our portion. So therefore, we don't want to lose those funds. So our plan is to come back to you to ask for those funds to be reallocated to a different program year so that we don't lose them. We keep them. We have to have a public meeting about that, which will be great to have some input on that. And so hopefully we'll give you this information that you're requesting now before that to know how we best want to utilize those funds.
are we prepared to make a motion on this item?
I'm happy to, unless you want to, Ms. Donner. Okay. So I move that we recommend town council adopt the resolution, trying to find it, sorry. Up on the screen.
You want-
so
I was going to run it up there to you.
No, I have it right here. It's just slow to bring it up. Put it up on the screen so I don't misspeak. Yeah, recommend a full town council adoption of the resolution to approve the Community Development Block Grant Entitlement Program 2025 to 2029, 5-year consolidated plan, and the annual action plan for program year 2025.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, any public comment on this particular item? Anyone signed up, Zendaya? Oh, anyone? Okay, we'll bring it back. Thank you, Michelle, appreciate you. Any further discussion here? Okay, all in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Okay, thank you very much. Next item, public comment on non-agenda items. Is anyone signed up here, Zendaya? Yes, sir.
Dave Ferguson, I'd like to address the importance of ethics in relation to the ATAX committee. But before I do, I want the public to understand that I have been trying to get the attention of the town council and the town leadership for well over 2 months on this issue right now, and no one seems to want to talk about it. The ATAX committee has a central role in guiding how Hilton Head invests millions of dollars in accommodations tax revenues. These funds are meant to strengthen tourism, the backbone of our economy, while also serving residents. That makes ethical stewardship not just important, but essential. The challenge, of course, is that ATAX dollars often go to organizations, nonprofits, and projects that directly involve committee members or their associates. This creates the perception and sometimes the reality of conflicts of interest. Even when everyone is acting in good faith, if residents believe decisions are being influenced by personal or financial ties, trust erodes. Ethics in this case means going beyond what is legally required to do. It means, number one, full disclosure of relationships and affiliations before funding votes are taken. Number two, clear recusals whenever there is a hint of conflict. Number three, transparency in scoring and recommendations, so residents can see how these decisions are made. And lastly, most importantly, making sure allocations align with the true purpose of ATAX, supporting tourism while benefiting the broader Hilton Head community. We all know that perception is reality in public service. If residents perceive favoritism, even when none exists, confidence in the process suffers. And when trust is lost, every dollar we spend is questioned, and every project funded is overshadowed by doubt. But the opposite is also true. When the ATAX process is seen as ethical, transparent, and fair, residents are far more likely to support tourism investments and to trust that their government is actually working for them. Hilton Head's reputation as a world-class destination depends not only on our beaches and on our amenities, but also on our governance. We should be known not only for attracting visitors, but for how responsibly we steward the funds that the visitors generate. So I urge the town, and specifically this committee, to strengthen ethical guardrails around ATAX now, with clearer policies, stronger disclosure requirements, and a commitment to transparency, something most of you run on. Because in the end, the way we spend these dollars is just not about tourism, it's about trust. Without trust, a leader is nothing.
Anyone else? Move to the next item of business. Adjourn. Thank you all for being with us today.
Mr. Colin disappeared on me. I wanted to thank him for his service. This is the last time he will present to this committee. He's always been very patient with us and bring a little bit of comic along with it. He will be dearly missed here, and we wish him well in his future endeavors.
I agree. I heard he had to go take care of Frankenbeans.
Yeah. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.